This week on The Record, can Missouri afford to slash the state income tax? Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft is running for governor on that idea. We'll ask him to do the math for The Record. St. Louis faces a hiring freeze. What will it cost, and is it for real? Board of Aldermen President Megan Green is on The Record. What changes are coming to Missouri education funding? It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Millions of dollars are pouring into the race for Missouri governor, most of them going to Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe. He's racking up donations to an early lead in the GOP donor primary ahead of the August 6th election. Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft boasts an early lead in the polls there, and with 107 days to go before that primary, Jay Ashcroft is on The Record. You don't have a blueprint for Missouri's budget. You have a red print. You want to get rid of the state income tax.
Yes.
Is that individual only or also corporate income tax?
Right now, focusing on individual. I hate the idea of subsidizing people that don't work and then penalizing people that do. I also think it's a great boon for small businesses and for entrepreneurs. A lot of times those don't go through the corporate income tax. Those are all taxed as individual. We need to get growth going in this state. You can see St. Louis. I remember when St. Louis was, well, much more of a shining beacon, and it's lost its luster.
It's an interesting question, though. You'd be blowing a $10 billion hole in the state budget.
Over time. I'm not saying that I will get it done in first day it'll happen. No. It's got to happen over time. You have to cut spending. You have to have growth.
Where would you cut?
Probably you would also, if I'll continue and you'll come back to that, I'm sure.
So are you committing to eliminate the state income tax in a first term?
No, I don't want to mislead people and tell them for sure I can get it done in 4 years. We've seen other states that have maybe taken 10 or 12 years to do it. But what I'm committing is that we will put into law the metrics that have to be made, the growth that has to be met, so that somewhere in that sort of time period we'll be there.
Okay, so more to come on the debate there. I want to know a little bit more about your role as Secretary of State. Mm-hmm. You're running for governor, but as Secretary of State, do you take any qualm with what's going on in Vernon County, where Republicans are purging candidates from the ballot over a litmus test, a purity test?
As Secretary of State, and let me get to my personal side after that, who is qualified to be on the ballot is generally not something I'm allowed to make the determination of. There was a Missouri Supreme Court case under Jason Kander that said the Secretary of State is really ministerial when filing people for office.
And the courts are looking at this, but should a local party put a purity test to a candidate and say, check this box and we'll maybe let you on the ballot?
Well, let me just say that generally speaking, as an individual, not as a Secretary of State, I think it's appropriate for parties to say that if you don't believe the sort of things that we believe, then you're not allowed to run as a Republican. Right now, there is an individual that has filed for governor. And according to reports, he was at one time a member of the Ku Klux Klan, and I think he says that he participated in some sort of cross-lighting ceremony that seems a whole lot similar to a cross-burning ceremony to me. As a Republican, I don't like the idea that someone that seems to have racist views can run as a Republican. I think that's appropriate to say, look, if you're going to judge people by the color of their skin, you're not going to be a Republican. We're not going to let you run as a Republican.
Interesting. There's also...
Do you want racists running as whatever political party you are? I'm not asking you what political party you are, but I think we should all be able to agree that we don't want racists running for office.
I certainly wouldn't vote for someone who holds openly racist views, and I would certainly hope they don't have closeted racist views either. You made an interesting remark on a radio show earlier this week and said the Missouri Bar Association was coming after you.
Yep.
What's going on?
I received what purported to be a complaint from the Bar Association. There was no written allegation of what I had done wrong. All it contained was the entry of appearance that I filed as part of the litigation over the abortion initiative petition language, and an article from Missouri Independent with a paragraph circled where I was talking about the case.
Your response to it, or the way you framed it, was interesting to my ear, because there was a time not long ago when dignified Democrats and Republicans alike would say, I look forward to this being proven, I look forward to my day in court. You painted yourself as something of a martyr of the system. Or
Well, I
said
don't know about
they're
that.
coming after me.
But when there's some sort of investigation and they refuse to tell you what the allegation actually is, that's the sort of thing that happens in gulags. That's not the sort of thing that happens in the United States.
So there's
an
a complaint.
investigation. They say there's a complaint, but they can't tell me this is what we say you violated and how you did so, which seems to me that's what a normal person would think a complaint is. And I think it's ridiculous that an association like that would in some way try to come after the Secretary of State acting in his official duties. It is my responsibility to protect that language that I wrote. It's just, it's Orwellian.
I look forward to see the outcome there. I assume they would just finish the investigation.
I'm hoping they'll actually tell
find
me
it.
what they're alleging I did.
I want to ask you also, though, about your comments about the criminal case against President Trump right now, the one in New York about the hush money
Yes.
and the falsified business records. You said it was malicious and should never have been brought.
Yeah,
By a grand jury? You take issue with the grand jury bringing an indictment?
Well, there's an old saying that a grand jury could indict a ham sandwich if the prosecutor wanted him to. Looking at what the elements of the crime are according to statute, and looking at what has been alleged, and you have a prosecutor that said that, well, this potentially was a misdemeanor, but if you are avoiding or using it to hide another crime, it becomes a felony. But we can't tell you what that other crime is.
That's a campaign violation, perhaps. I think there's been some
No, but
legal
isn't it
theory
the
there.
prosecutor's responsibility in a court of law to tell the defendant what they supposedly did wrong?
Sure, and I think
Well,
that you're
when are they
raising the
going to be
question
able to
about-
do that?
I think we're going to see in this court case once they
It
see
should
the
have
jury.
already happened.
Question, though, would you have found that information, that President Trump, former candidate Trump, was cheating on his pregnant wife with a porn star and then paying her hush money to keep her quiet about it? Would you have found that relevant information as you tried to pick a president as a voter?
Well, I don't know that it's been proven that he was cheating on his wife or anything, but they were allegations. Let me just say that so you don't get in trouble. To be honest, would that have changed how the people of New York voted with what they went for Joe Biden? I don't think there's any way it would have changed
I'm
that.
asking if it would have changed your vote.
But if you look at that statute is about it would have affected how the people of New York voted.
Right, but I'm asking
So-
you, as a Republican voter,
No, it wouldn't have changed how I was going to vote.
that you would have no problem with a person with that relationship to fidelity.
There was no way in the world I was going to vote for Joe Biden.
No.
And I think that's been proven
We're talking
by
about
what
Republican
we've seen the
primary
last 4
in
years.
2016. The choice was Hillary Clinton, and before that it was Ted Cruz or Rand Paul
Well,
or Marco Rubio or...
I can say the same thing about Hillary Clinton. I'm very thankful that we dodged that bullet.
All right, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Much more of our extended interview with Secretary Ashcroft online. Just go to ksdk.com and you can watch it there. School choice expanding in Missouri. New reaction to that education reform package now headed to Governor Parsons' desk. Next. A massive education reform bill is heading to Governor Mike Parsons' desk in Jefferson City. The Missouri House passed that bill to expand the state's school choice program. It would open the door for more students from wealthier families to leave public school and enroll in private schools. The proposal also says it will set a minimum wage for teachers at $40,000 a year. Senator Andrew Koenig wrote that bill and joined us on this program last week. But House Democrat Deb Lavender says the bill, quote, does not guarantee teacher pay increases, transportation costs, or any of the good promises. More of our conversation with Senator Koenig up online. You can also text the word record to 314-425-5355 for more of that conversation. Jury selection in Donald Trump's hush money trial proved a cumbersome process this last week. The first day of the trial ended with no one chosen to be on that panel of 12 jurors. The search for impartial jurors was a recurring issue. Multiple jurors were dismissed, expressing doubt they might not be able to be fair. It took until late Thursday to seat 12 jurors, still searching for alternates. The former president faces charges alleging he falsified business records to cover up a sex scandal during the 2016 presidential campaign. He has pleaded not guilty. An influx of migrants coming to Illinois could add new costs to the state's K-12 education budget. The State Board of Education is asking for $35 million in next year's budget to cover some of those unique costs associated with teaching students who just arrived in the U.S. Governor J.B. Pritzker did not include any of those funding requests for migrant education in his budget proposal. Lawmakers are expected to finalize their budget for the next fiscal year in late May. In the last meeting of the session of this year, the St. Louis Board of Aldermen approved a plan to install red light and speed cameras throughout the city. It's all part of a larger traffic safety plan. That bill now sits on Mayor Jones' desk. She's indicated she will sign it, saying it's a, quote, necessary tool in our city's ability to combat reckless driving. Board of Alderman President Megan Green joins us after this break. Board of Alderman President Megan Green joins us now on the record. Good to have you back with us.
Thanks for having me over again.
Everything is starting all over again, a new session, a new
Yes.
budget year, so we're back to square one. Mayor Jones kicked things off with this hiring freeze for non-essential city workers. Was that a premature decision?
I think it was a little bit premature, and I do want to make it clear, though, that any application that is currently posted on the city website is still open and hiring.
They just said you can't post any new job openings.
Correct, for the time being, and there's a number of reasons for that.
But weren't most of the open jobs already posted?
Most of them, yes.
So what kind of a hiring freeze is it really?
I think that's yet to be determined. From my point of view, I think we're all taking a cautious approach, not knowing how the courts are going to rule on the earnings tax in the coming months.
She used a mix of explanations to describe the reason for this hiring freeze. One was that the city might lose that earnings tax, a big chunk of revenue coming into the city coffers, but also this firefighter pension consolidation. You guys seem to have a disagreement there. She says it's going to cost money down the long run. You think it's going to save money?
Correct.
What's your case? Why is she wrong?
So what I think is happening here is all we did at the Board of Aldermen is consolidate the two pension boards for the firefighters' pension. The other pension boards for the city are all worker controlled. Our firefighters lost worker control of their pension board back when we went through pension reform back in 2012. So all this does is make one board instead of two. It doesn't change the pension system anyway. And so because of that, we believe it's actually going to result in cost savings because we're no longer going to be having to pay for two different pension boards.
And a firefighter who testified in favor of this switch pointed out that the new system that had a separate board over it had bigger losses in the last year than the old system did. So it's interesting how some of those decisions were diverging and how they were making their investments. When it comes to this new session that you're kicking off, you said last year was the year of the tenant. This year is going to be the year of the worker. A lot of people need places to live, and a lot of people have employers and like to make a check. So kind of a populist theme I see here.
We're really getting at the heart of bread and butter issues. We know that having a stable, safe, affordable place to live and a reliable paycheck are two ways to make sure that there's stability for people in our city.
But you pointed something out during your end of year press conference the other day, that you said that rent is rising in St. Louis at a rate much faster than the rest of the country.
It is, yes.
Why is it so much faster here than it is everywhere else?
I think there's a combination of factors. One, we're not building as fast as we need to, the way that some other cities are. I think there's a number of reasons for that, including higher interest rates that have stalled some development projects to get some new housing online. Second thing is the state of Missouri, unlike a lot of other states, caps the number of low-income housing tax credits, which means that we can only get a small number of credits every year to build new affordable housing, which puts us at a disadvantage compared to other cities.
The mayor's economic justice plan calls for a couple of things. One, making it easier for people to get that down payment for their first home and get into a house, but also she's proposing in her budget, she's highlighting in her budget some spending on low-income housing.
Yep.
Is that should the city focus more of its reserves, cash reserves, on something like that? If the rate of living, the cost of living is so much higher here than everywhere else, why not pour more money into something like that?
I think we definitely will. As we go into this next session, we are going to be looking at doing a small fee on nightly stays at Airbnb, something that used to be on hotels in our city. $1.50 per night per room. And the idea is to put that into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to help bolster our ability to develop more affordable housing in the city.
Part of the reasoning there, I assume, is that the existence and the proliferation of these long-term rentals, Airbnbs, has driven up the cost of
We
rent.
know that it has. It's taken what was historically affordable rentals off of the marketplace because you can get more money as an Airbnb after a couple nights of stay than you could charge in a month of rent.
You highlighted in your speech to the board that the city has curbed its use of developer dollars, basically, or incentives going to big businesses, and you wanted to see more public buy-in or public investment from those people who would benefit from it. Let me give you an example. Bill DeWitt III at the Cardinals has said it's premature to pretend that the Cardinals are asking for any public money to make capital investments at Busch Stadium. But if that question was before you right now, what would you say to the Cardinals?
So what we're working on right now to preemptively address asks like that, should the Cardinals come forth, is a community benefit agreement legislation.
Isn't it a community benefit to have that many people downtown?
Not necessarily, not in and of itself. So there has to be things like affordable housing or attention to the school district, living wage jobs associated with projects that are all considered community benefits. So what we're looking at doing is, instead of negotiating these on a case-by-case basis, making legislation that makes it clear what the rules of the game are, so that when we have these big projects come through the board, we know that there's a set type of community benefits that developers can come forth with.
I want to challenge two parts of that. You said it's not necessarily a benefit to have all those people downtown for the Cardinals. One, we know that the sales tax revenue and the foot traffic is a net positive financially for the city. I think you wouldn't question
Correct.
that. Second, there's the social component of just having more people. Police will tell you vacant streets invite crime. And the first weekend of April, when we saw 100,000 sports fans and tourists in downtown, there was a drastically lower number of reported crimes and incidents. It was like minuscule. There were like 3 cars that were broken into.
Yeah, let me clarify that a little bit. That's not to say that it's not beneficial to have people downtown. It definitely is. The question being asked, though, is whether we should subsidize with tax dollars an ownership that has a $4 billion net worth in order to continue to have those folks downtown. And my thought is that the lease goes through 2041 at the moment for that stadium. Cardinals are not leaving anytime soon. We have time to negotiate something, but we have to make sure that it really works for the public. I think what we saw ultimately with the soccer stadium is we were able to reach a deal where the revenue to fund it was essentially generated within that stadium. So it wasn't a burden that was being shouldered on residents beyond those who are actually using the stadium.
Would you say the Cardinals have been good corporate citizens?
I think that they have, and the previous deal that we did with the Cardinals Stadium was a pretty good deal, and I think we should be building upon that. But when it comes to foregoing tax revenue for sometimes decades, we have to understand the impact that has on our public schools.
In the short time we have left, just give us a quick sneak peek preview of what this means, this labor-driven, worker-driven agenda. What does that actually mean in a tangible sense? What can voters expect in this next year?
I mean, the first thing we have to be doing is making sure that the current ordinances that we have on the books are actually enforced and have the staffing and the capacity to enforce them. We've heard complaints about our prevailing wage legislation not being enforced well, and so looking at those enforcement mechanisms to make sure there's actual teeth. The second thing is being able to support the rights of folks in our community to organize and make sure that we do have strong unions. We have the ability for people to unionize without retaliation, without intimidation, and those were some of the agreements that we wrote into the Midas Hotel deal, was to ensure that should workers decide that they wanted to unionize, that they would not be met with intimidation or retaliation.
A lot to come at City Hall. We'll be watching. Thanks for joining us. He memorialized Illinois history for 7 decades. We look back and remember him next. Illinois lost a gentleman this week. You might not know his name or recognize his face. After all, it was often hidden behind a camera lens. But many of you have seen his work, history documented from his perspective, often in a quiet corner of the Illinois State Capitol or maybe out on the campaign trail. Lee Milner's career as a photojournalist began in 1965 for the Effingham Daily News. After a short stint in the U.S. Army, Milner photographed Presidents Jimmy Carter through to Barack Obama. And someone whose title once bore just as much prestige in Illinois politics, his honor the mayor of Chicago, Richard J. Daley, during visits to Springfield. While Lee had a special knack for helping us remember those split-second moments in time, it was all those moments in between that I'll remember. Moments of kind curiosity, gentle admonition, and more than anything, steady support for other journalists around him. Lee died Wednesday after a long fight with pancreatic cancer. Through ups and downs, he was a reliable fixture at the Capitol. I didn't even know he had taken this photo of me until afterwards when he gave me a copy just so I could have it. He was documenting the return to normal after the pandemic had sidelined the State House for so long. We had a pretty good idea that Lee's health was fading these last few weeks, so several dignitaries honored him. His old paper wrote a story about him. He told the Illinois Times, "I certainly would like to be remembered as a good father with successful kids, a good husband, and I suppose a loyal worker and mostly a helper. Let the record reflect he was all the above and more. That's all of our time this week. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back more next week with the school choice bill in Missouri and other late political news. Until then, we're off the record.